Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Giobbi. In this lecture, we're going to be taking a critical historical look at traditional marketing and neuromarketing through the media psychology lens. Let's begin with a definition. According to the American Marketing Association, advertising is any paid form of non-personal communication about an organization, product, service, or idea by an identified sponsor. Historians of advertising and marketing often point to the earliest use of advertising space in the colonial newspaper, the Boston Newsletter, in 1704. So we see there's quite a long history of using advertising to profitize, as we would say today, monetize the media. Of course, with the industrialization, with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, this saw a shift from products and services that were highly unique, highly individualized, handcrafted, mercantile artifacts that were purchased by order. So in other words, someone wanted a table or a chair, and a craftsman took that commission and built the table and chair specifically to the demands of the consumer. With industrialization, we saw mass production begin where there were so many standardized duplicates of the same product. What we lost in industrialization was a personalized, unique product. We lost the craftsman tradition in this, and what we saw rise was with industrialization was a standardization of products. So the products lost their uniqueness, and in part of having a surplus of products. So in other words, there were more products than were needed. So to create this artificial demand for the product, if we look at capitalist economics, value comes from a supply-demand relationship. If there's limited supply, then the value increases, and if there is an increase in demand, the value increases. So if we have an industrialization where the supply was endless, we needed to somehow artificially create a demand, otherwise the value dropped. So in industrialization, we turned to advertising to create desire, to create want for new. And this is really where advertising develops during the 19th century Industrial Revolution, when there's a surplus, an abundance of supply, and individuals needed to create artificial demand in order to make a profit. In the 1920s, we saw a shift in the United States from people buying patterns and sewing their own clothing to buying pre-made clothing that was designed and purchased in department stores. This was part of the generation of what we refer to as brand named, the growth of brand names. So prior to this, there were not as individualistic identified products that were described in advertisements in a way that made them unique to other products. And along with this concept came the idea of the modernization of the self. And in this way, the term modernization is often used in this context to refer to the process of change from a society's, from an individual being born into a definition, into a societal role, into the modern era in which an individual chooses who they are. Now, this is a concept that's greatly exploited, utilized by advertising for using products to advertise a certain lifestyle. So individuals now wanted to present their identity to society at large through the products that they purchased. This was not the natural way of things. This was how advertisers used the need for identity to sell products. So now we're not just having products that fulfill a need, we're having products that one can purchase to portray a social identity. And this is the concept of modernization that gives rise to brand names and brand name advertising. So in this economy of abundance, we saw the number of products available far exceeding the demand. And so each individual product was given an identity itself, a sort of personality that was then used to sell the product, to make it unique from other products. And in some ways, some historians and psychologists argue that the individual themselves, the individual personality themselves has become a commodity at this point, something that was put on the character market. This is often a critique of the psychologist Erich Fromm. So out of this entire Industrial Revolution phenomenon, we saw the advent of standardization. This is the idea that if you purchase a cheeseburger from McDonald's in one state, it's going to be identical to a McDonald's cheeseburger in a state in the other side of the United States, or at this point on the other side of the world. This is consistency and standardization in product. It was also the advent of statistics. Mathematical statistics were first used in industrialized production to predict what percentage of products would be normal, would be sellable, and which would be abnormal. It was French and Belgian theorists, particularly Adolphe Quetelet, and Auguste Comte, who utilized statistics on human beings and developed the idea of the l'homme moyen, the average man. The normalcy became an idea in this period. Not only normalcy in products, but normalcy in human beings, which has obviously greatly affected how we understand human psychology. The classic example of early marketing identity to a brand identity, is the Quaker Oats Man. If you look at Quaker Oats, this was one of the first prepackaged breakfast cereals, and the Quaker Oats Man put a face on the product container. That face of the man in the Quaker garb was an honest, trustworthy, inviting, warm face that showed stability and honesty and reliability. And you saw his face on billboards, streetcars, newspapers, church bulletins, and in cookbooks. Anywhere you looked, you could find this friendly face. This was one of the earliest, if not the earliest, examples of a truly developed product identity in advertising. So as products grew, as more products became available in the marketplace, the demand for advertising grew, and this shifted into an advertising-supported media, first with newspapers, secondly with magazines, eventually with radio, television, cinema, using different forms of advertising techniques. One of the main forms of revenue for publishers became selling ad space. In a newspaper, the percentage of advertising space to news is called the news hole. So something like the New York Times might have 60% news and 40% news hole. Some of the less reputable magazines and newspapers have rather small content and a lot of advertising. Same with radio shows and television shows. So as we look at this, we begin to see that magazines and other forms of media began to be produced to target certain audiences which would attract advertisers for that medium. So the publisher, Cyrus Curtis, described the situation this way. He said, "Do you know why we publish the Ladies' Home Journal? The editor thinks it is for the benefit of American women. That is an illusion, but a very proper one for him to have. But I will tell you the real reason. The publisher's reason is to give you people who manufacture things that American women want and buy a chance to tell them about your products." So as the saying goes, magazines weren't being sold to subscribers. Subscribers were being sold to advertisers through magazines, through newspapers. So this brings us to a very interesting example of general interest magazines. Up and through the 1960s and 70s, there were magazines that were general interest. That means there weren't a specific niche magazine. And it's not that these magazines lost subscriptions. There were still people buying the magazines, still people subscribing to them, enjoying them. But the reason many of these magazines closed, disappeared, for example, Life magazine was one of these magazines that was a general interest magazine. The reason these closed was because advertisers lost interest. An advertiser wanted more specific, not general audience. They didn't want to waste their advertising dollars to a general audience. They wanted to identify a specific audience. So, for example, individual who is possibly selling an automobile is going to advertise in automobile magazines. An individual is selling an automobile, a general purpose magazine would be wasted on individuals who might not be interested in cars or purchasing a car. So magazines and advertising in general switched to a niche market in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and certainly today we have many niche magazines. This is specific magazines, not general magazines. The same is true for television, advertising, and others. We have advertising that are run in a synchronous, a complementary way to the topic of the program or of the magazine. So in the 1950s, 1960s, with the advent of television media, the medium of television, advertising began to play more and more of a role in the revenue. Radios and television companies look directly to advertising revenue to pay celebrities and to publish programming. So we started to see things like the Maxwell House Coffee Time and Lucky Strike Dance Orchestra and the General Motors Family Party. These were programs that had a sponsor, not unlike public television has sponsors today. So one company would sponsor an entire half hour or hour of television programming. This is contrasted to the more contemporary model that came about in the 1960s through today, which is commercials, 30-second commercials that airs intermittently between program from multiple advertisers. We also have different types of advertising. We have local advertising and we have national advertising. So local advertising often uses a direct message, a direct advertising message that tells you to go to a local business and purchase their products or their services. A national advertising is for a major brand that's available throughout the entire country, so you can buy in any community. It's not local but national. And there's also indirect advertising or indirect indirect action messages for advertising, and that's not necessarily selling a product, but selling a product image, establishing a certain image of a product. So sometimes we can distinguish these types of advertisements. Is this advertisement directing me to go and purchase the item or the service? That's a direct action message. Or is it an indirect action message? Is this simply an advertisement that's promoting the image of the product itself? Three other forms of advertising that are not directed at goods and services are advocacy ads, public service ads, and business-to-business or trade ads. So an advocacy ad is not promoting a product or a service, but a point of view, an opinion. We might even call this propaganda. So, for example, a certain political ad that would be placed would be an advocacy ad. There was an example in the early days of telephone. In the early 1900s, AT&T ran an advocacy ad that promoted the idea of it only being natural for a telephone company to be a monopoly, to to alter certain trade laws that were in place at the time. Public service ads, maybe the most famous is Smokey the Bear from the 1960s. This is a public service ad, the Advertising Council of the U.S. that came out of 1940s post-World War II era. Smokey the Bear, Rosie the Riveter, the Crying Indian commercial. If those of you who may be older will remember in the 1970s, early 1970s, a Crying Indian commercial that ran about pollution. Many of these are public service ads. This is an advertising to promote a certain ideology, a certain idea. And then trade advertising are business-to-business ads. And business-to-business ads are products and services that are promoted directly to businesses. So one of the most interesting aspects of advertising and marketing for the psychologist is the concept of targeting. And targeting is identifying which programming will attract the target audience, the target viewers for the product or service that's being advertised, or ideology. So we have what are often called graphics, demographics, geographics, and psychographics. Of course, demographics have to do with socioeconomic and political and ethnic characteristics. These are demographics. Geographics are areas of location, for example, the Northeast, the West Coast, the Midwest, the South in the United States. And also psychographics. And psychographics are very interesting to us as media psychologists. Some psychologists are hired to develop psychographics, psychometric identifiers for advertising. And so we're going to take a look now at a few of the major psychographic tools that are used within the media. The first psychographic resource I'd like to share with you is through the Nielsen Corporation. And I'll show you, we'll pull up their website. This is My Best Segments by Nielsen. Nielsen, of course, does television ratings, etc. Ratings are important because it shows how many viewers are watching a certain program, which dictates how much the program or the network can charge for advertising space during that particular programming. So the higher the ratings, the higher the real estate value of the commercial time. So segments, these are demographics of individuals in the United States. And we can look up these demographics by zip code. So if we look here, the zip code lookup, let's just do a couple for a sample. We have here, we'll put a zip code in here, 100, let's say 17, which is Midtown Manhattan. And we'll hear demographics. This is for business use. So Nielsen, this is the free aspect of the service. The sample, you can actually pay for a subscription to get really in-depth documentation of the segments here. So we see this is the aspect of New York City that we're talking about, 10017 in Midtown on the east side. I just randomly chose this zip code for no reason. So where Grand Central Station is, so it's Midtown East Side. So we see here the demographics. These are the people that are, if you have a product to market, you want to find individuals that are going to fit your market, or are going to fit your product demographic and advertise to those individuals. So this is upper middle class age family mix. Upper middle age family mix, a bohemian mix, the American dreams. This is called money and brains. These are wealthy older families. Urban achievers, there's lower, mid, younger, mostly without kids, and young digerati. So these are wealthy, younger family mix. So if we click on each of these, we'll get an in-depth understanding of what these are. The digerati are tech-savvy and live in fashionable neighborhoods on the urban fringe. Affluent, highly educated, and ethnically mixed. Young digerati communities are typically filled with trendy apartments and condos, fitness clubs, and clothing boutiques, casual restaurants, and all types of bars, from juiced coffee to microbrew. So you get the idea here of this is one of the areas of the segment. We can look at Bohemian mix. Let's see what this demographic is. A collection of mobile urbanites. Bohemian mix represents the nation's most liberal lifestyles. Its residents are ethnically diverse, progressive mix of young singles, couples, and families ranging from students to professionals. In their funky row houses and apartments, Bohemian mixers are the early adopters who are quick to check out the latest movie, nightclub, laptop, and microbrew. So we can see how these different demographics. Let's take a look at, for example, a demographic. We can even go by map here. Let's take the demographic for Newark. Union City, where are we? Over here. You see these are very interesting. I know as you're looking through these, you're saying, my goodness, these are very, each of these have such an individually unique demographic, from Montclair to Woodbridge. Okay, so here we are in Newark, and we will click in here, get a little closer, and let's click on Newark, New Jersey. Okay, 07104. So I guess you have to put the zip code in, and now it's going to load and show us for Newark, New Jersey, lower middle-aged families, Bohemian mix, lower middle-aged with mostly with kids, lower middle younger mostly without kids, downscale older mostly without kids, urban elders, urban achievers, low-rise living, Bohemian mix, and big city blues. Big city blues is a very interesting demographic with a population that's more than 40% Latino. Big city blues has one of the highest concentrations of Hispanic Americans in the nation, but it's also the multi-ethnic address for low-income Asian and African American households occupying older inner-city apartments. Concentrated in a handful of major metros, these middle-aged singles and single-parent families face enormous challenges: low incomes, uncertain jobs, modest educations. So this is one of the segments of, here's the Bohemian mix, which we interestingly saw share with Middle East, Midtown East Side and Manhattan, low-rise living. So these are different demographics here. And then we have these charts over here. We look at the first one. This is household income. Here we see the majority of the individuals in this demographic, in the Newark demographic, have an income of less than $25,000 a year. Very few making $150,000 or more. We see household compositions. You see there's roughly a third of the individuals are one-person households. One half of the pie chart is 1 to 2 people. Almost half with no children, married with children, married with no children. So we see how these are all broken up. And all of this is of great value to advertisers to know how to shape their message to appeal to these individuals. Population by age. This is the distribution in Newark. And population by ethnicity and, as they say, race, which, let's see, we have large Hispanic and Latino population, large African American population, large Western European or white population, etc. Some other races. So if this is important, let's take a look at these paid demographics for another area of Manhattan. We'll look at 10017 again, just to get how about this? Look at this demographic. The majority of people in 10017 demographic of Midtown Manhattan make $150,000 a year or more. Very few people are making less than $100,000 a year in this area. Mostly one-person households, no children. Age group, you see, major age group, 21 to 34 years old. And very interesting demographics here. So this is one of the two major segments by Nielsen of psychographics. And this one is My Best Segments by Nielsen. You can take a look at these by Googling Nielsen My Best Segments and look up your own neighborhood. So the founder of the concept of psychographics, Emmanuel Demby, he defines psychographics as the use of psychological, sociological, and anthropological data to segment a market into relevant groupings. And he feels that it's not only important to understand what an individual's income is to target them for marketing, but to know where their income is going. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it remaining stagnant? And he feels that this is reflected in this whole idea of lifestyles segments. Perhaps the most famous of any of these lifestyle segmentations is the Vows. And the Vows is a psychographic that's probably the most widely used. And it's currently owned by Strategic Business Insights. It was originally developed by SRI International. And the Vows takes, not unlike the Nielsen segments, looks at 8 different segments and 2 broad categories. And it sees people as either innovators or survivors. So survivors are defined as low resources, low innovation individuals. Let's see if we can look on their website here, Vows types. Here we go. So the survivors would be individuals who are defined as having low resources and low innovation. And innovators are high resources and high innovation. These are, and then on the spectrum we have ideals, achievement, and self-expression. So the ideas would be thinkers and believers. These are people of critical thinking. We think like scientists and whatnot. So if we click on this, we'll see members of this group typically have ought and should benchmark for social conduct, have a tendency towards analysis paralysis. This is when you overthink and don't act. Plan, research, and consider before they act. Enjoy a historical perspective, are financially established, are not influenced by what's popular or what's hot. Use technology in a functional ways, prefer traditional intellectual pursuits, and buy proven products. These are thinkers. And they tend to be, if we look back here on the scale, they tend to be on the innovator side of things. Now, believers tend to have lower resources. They're on this side of the scale. They believe in basic rights and wrongs and lead a good life. So this is like traditional family values types individuals. If you look here, they have little images of the people that they're talking about. These are thinkers, apparently. And these are believers. Heartland type imagery. Rely on spirituality and faith to provide inspiration. Want friendly communities. Watch TV and read romance novels to find and escape. Want to know where things stand. Have no tolerance for ambiguity. Ambiguity, of course, is uncertainty. They want to know how things stand. What's yes or no, true or false, right or wrong. Are not looking, black and white thinking, in other words, are not looking to change society, find advertising a legitimate source of information. So these individuals are not critical about advertising. They think that they believe in the capitalist model of advertising and are not critical of it. Value constancy and stability, loyalty, in other words, and have strong me too fashion attitudes. So in other words, conformity, me too, conformity. Let's look here. Achievers. You're getting the point here. So there's 8 of these different categories. And achievers have a me first, my family first attitude. These are achievers. Are committed to family and job, are fully scheduled, are goal-oriented, hardworking, moderates, act as anchors of the status quo. They're conscious of what their friends think. They're private people. They're professionals. We have makers. This is an interesting group of individuals. These are the makers. Are distrustful of government, have strong interest in all things automotive, have strong outdoor interest, hunting and fishing, believe in sharp gender roles. This is another one of the family or traditional values type individuals. Want to protect what they perceive to be theirs, see themselves as straightforward, and they appear to others to be anti-intellectual, and they want to own land. Experiencers, they want everything. Here's the experiencers. They want everything. Are first in and first out of the trend adoption. They go against the current mainstream, are up on the latest fashions, love physical activity, their sensation thinking. This really reminds me of the Jungian models of personality theory. See themselves are very sociable, believe that friends are extremely important. They're spontaneous and have a heightened sense of visual stimulation. The strivers. Here are the strivers. Here's some imagery of these individuals. Strivers have low resources and an achievement motivation. They have revolving employment, high temporary unemployment, use video and video games as a form of fantasy, are fun-loving, imitative, rely heavily on public transportation, are center of low-status street culture, desire to better their lives but have difficulty realizing their desire, and they wear their wealth. And that could be jewelry, tattoos, ornamentation, etc. So the strivers have low resources and an achievement motivation. So here are these are the different types of individuals, the survivors. Survivors are lowest resources and they have no primary motivation, are cautious and risk averse. The oldest, they're thrifty, are not concerned about appearing traditional or trendy. They take comfort in routine, family, people. So here we have this, we can take this scale. So if we want to pardon me for one moment when I find this. So we can take this Vows survey and get an idea of what this is. So we're looking, this is psychometric tools. So this is developed by psychologists. And specifically, there's an area of psychology that we're often discussing with this, and this is looking at person lifestyle, and it's consumer psychology, and consumer psychology is a subfield that's typically in private industry, but can be found in public university as well, in university systems. But so here we see Likert Scale. And we go from mostly disagree to mostly agree. This should be familiar from your courses that you take on psychometrics, on how to design psychometric instruments. So you might be asked as a media psychologist to either critique or to design one of these scales. So you have 42 questions. I'm going to do fictitiously and just go through this. Have you taken this survey before? I'm going to say no. I have taken it before. I'm just going to answer these questions as if I were someone else. So this would not be how I would answer this if I were filling it out for myself, but just to demonstrate the outcome. So I am interested in theories, mostly disagrees, and say I'm not interested in theories. I often ask people, I'm often interested in theories. This doesn't mean conspiracy theories, of course. This means theories, ideas of how things work, scientific theories, political theories, etc. I often ask people advice about clothes, vacations, and other spending decisions. Maybe this person likes to consult their friends on how they should spend their money. A good negotiator doesn't just get the food in the bowl, but the bowl itself. A good negotiator doesn't just get the food in the bowl, but the bowl itself. So this seems very aggressive kind of idea to me. So maybe Oh, I don't know. We'll put this, somewhat agree. I love to make things I can use every day. I follow the latest trends and fashions. You might be noticing that this is very similar to a personality inventory, such as the MMPI. Just as the Bible says, the world literally was created in 6 days. I like being in charge of the group. I like to learn about art, culture, and history. I often crave excitement. I am really interested in only a few things. I would rather make something than buy it. I dress more fashionably than most people. The federal government should encourage prayers in public schools. I have more ability than most people. Now, as we're clicking through these answers just to see how the results pan out, keep in mind you don't have to. This could be gathering information. Could be also done by in the supermarket having a little bonus card to see trends in what kind of products are chosen at what time of the year. How often an individual. This is all data purchases certain products. This is all data collection. We are rewarded to use these cards by discounts. They're called discount cards, but in actuality, they're consumer market demographic information cards. So all that data that's collected at the supermarket with your card, your little shopper card, is used to then sell that information to industries like this that broker consumer information to sell to marketing agencies. Want to be considered fashionable. Religion is the most important way to know what's morally correct. I like the challenge of doing something I've never done before. I like to make things with my hands. I'm always looking for a thrill. I like doing things that are new and different. I like to look through hardware and automotive stores. I would like to understand more about the universe and how it works. I need to get the news every day. We'll say that this person is a female. We're going to say that they're age 25 to 29. They are now married. Let's say that they went to college. And let's say they are making, I don't know, $35,000 to $39,000 a year. Are you a student or currently enrolled? We'll say this person is not. And email address. I'm going to put my Rutgers address in here just for some. I'll be getting all kind of interesting ads that fit the demographic of this person, whomever they are, this fictitious person, and we're going to see our results now. So this person that we've fictitiously developed is an achiever and an experiencer. So this is an individual, again, they have a me first, my family first attitude, hardworking, goal-oriented, peer conscious, act as anchors of the status quo, private, professional, and moderate. So there's one description of what this individual. I lost it. Don't make that mistake. So you have the idea here of how the Vows in Strategic Business Insights. If you want to try this for yourself, go to Strategic Business Insights survey.com. I'll put it on the blackboard for you to explore.